I got to know Carol first when she came to Peace Corps headquarters on her way to becoming a country director in Malawi. And I was just coming back from the Africa region at that time, and it was clear that she had all the skills and leadership capabilities of being a country director. By all accounts, she excelled in that role, and uh, after I left Peace Corps headquarters in 2017, Carol followed me back to the Africa region, where she became the chief of operations. And it was around that time where the pandemic began, and she was asked to serve as acting Peace Corps director. And I think she was eminently prepared by virtue of having been a Peace Corps volunteer. She has 25 years of experience in public and private sector work, especially with small business development, supporting infectious disease prevention, and with women's empowerment. And Carol, those are great areas for a Peace Corps leader. You were a volunteer in Romania, as you know. Carol, uh, I'm happy to turn it over to you in a second, but before I do, I just want to thank you and your team and acknowledge that we have a little bit to celebrate Peace Corps and MPCA this evening. We have signed a renewal of our 5-year memorandum of understanding a few weeks ago, and it is really our pleasure and honor to serve alongside Peace Corps and supporting the returned Peace Corps volunteers and connections between our community many years after we returned from service. Your team has been fabulous to work with. I would just have to acknowledge a couple of individuals. David White has been a fabulous new deputy director for Peace Corps, and I'm sure you agree. He's been a quick study, and he's been very supportive of our work. And as I work through the implementation plan with Andrew Wilson, the director of the Third Goal Office, it's just very clear that where there's some ways that we wish Peace Corps could support the community, we're finding new ways where in those areas if you can't support us in some ways, for government reasons, we're finding lots of ways where we can pick up the slack, and Andrew's been great in leading that process. And I just thank you for your support, for joining us for another 5 years of working together, and hopefully many more. And I'll turn it over to you at this point, Carol. Good to see you.
Great. Thanks so much, Dan, for that wonderful introduction. Thanks to John Lee Evans, the board chair of MPCA, all of the board members and staff for organizing the conference, for all of your work in advocating on behalf of Peace Corps and returned Peace Corps volunteers. And big welcome to all of the RPCVs on the call. And thank you for continuing to answer the call to serve. This is just been the honor of a lifetime to serve in this capacity and to honestly feel the love from around the world as we really navigate this new era for Peace Corps in a post-COVID environment where so much is changing. So I wanted to share with you this quote from the president of Armenia. He really, I was in the Balkans. It was great to be back, in that region. And this quote just really spoke to me. To understand each other, we must see each other and be close to each other. And only through human contact can we understand the world. If I could share with you a quote from all of the foreign leaders I met on this trip and around the world, you would just be blown away by how much love there is out there for Peace Corps and how much the leadership in our host countries really do appreciate the work that volunteers do, and they understand the impact of that human-to-human connection. On that particular trip, I was in 5 countries, met with 4 heads of state who made time for me when I was there, which is just a huge testament to really how much those countries value the Peace Corps. And in each and every one, there's a slightly different nuance in terms of, what exactly it is and how they see Peace Corps coming in. But the thing that resonates across the board is that our volunteers bring a spark of energy, a spark of passion. They work with young people to see sort of what is possible And they bring people together from different ethnic backgrounds, and from rural communities and urban communities. So the work that is happening out there is just absolutely beautiful. I know that you all know that. I wish I could bottle it and release it so people can really understand the true depth of what it is that we do. But you know, these kinds of quotes and these engagements really are something very special. So where are we today? Thank you, Dan, for taking us back 4 years ago to our global evacuation. You know, we, as you know, evacuated almost 7,000 volunteers in 8 days, truly unprecedented. But this is a time when we're turning our attention forward. So we began our return to service 2 years ago. We intentionally started small, work out the kinks, make sure that we truly had COVID under control, and that we were ready to bring volunteers back. We now have 3,000 volunteers in 60 countries. We expect to reach 3,300 by the end of the fiscal year. We swore in our first group of volunteers in Sri Lanka since 1998. And again, going back to the unique aspects of different countries in Sri Lanka, they told me that English was a language of peace. There were two ethnic groups who have been at war for a very long time, and they literally don't speak each other's language. And English is that language that can bring them together. And they were so excited to have volunteers back. One of the volunteers had a little parade in his community when, after swearing in, when he went to his community. So it was really just amazing. I will also be headed down to El Salvador later this month. We just announced the reopening there, and the team has just in record time put that post together. They've got, I believe, 8 or 9 volunteers who are going in to help start the post up, all volunteers who have served previously in other countries and have extended for a 3rd year to help launch that program, which is very exciting. And we just recently announced the reopening of our program in Palau. So lots of great stuff happening, and just really a lot of new interest from host countries that really do, as I said, recognize that value and, you know, what it is that Peace Corps provides. And what I'm seeing is, and I get this question sometimes, you know, are they really interested in having generalists serve? Or has that changed in a post-pandemic environment? What I will say is that some countries, and I would say they are the minority, a few countries have said we only want, for example, qualified teachers, or, you know, more advanced professionals in certain areas. The vast majority have said we will take your generalists and please give us more. And I think I've talked about that on some of these Connect conferences in the past, where, you know, they're asking for 500, 1,000, in one case, 10,000 volunteers. Really, again, recognizing that spark that the volunteers bring with them. I was just in Fiji and Tonga, so wanted to just highlight a little bit about our work in the Pacific, which is incredibly important and a place where Peace Corps, again, is just so truly loved. Was able to participate in a memorandum of understanding ceremony with the Minister for Rural and Maritime Development and Disaster Management, which is a mouthful. And the minister there said that Peace Corps is a part of his nation's history, and that most Fijians have engaged with Peace Corps in their lives. He himself had fond memories of the 3 volunteers who served in his community back in 1970s. And I also participated in the Tonga swearing in. The Prime Minister was preparing for the Pacific Island Leaders Forum meeting, which had foreign leaders from all over the islands coming in on Saturday. Our swearing in was on Friday, and he made time to come. He said he wouldn't leave the capital for just anyone, but he would do it for Peace Corps, and he made a point to be there and come and swear in our volunteers. Some of those pictures there are from the Tongan volunteers last week of training. Tonga is the first country to have some dedicated climate resilience volunteers, and they were training all of the volunteers in some of the climate resilience work. So we went and planted mangroves. They did some work on coral reef restoration and invasive species. And we met with some women's groups and some community groups to hear about what they were doing to protect themselves from the potential harmful impacts of climate change and tsunamis and other weather events that they had experienced. So some really exciting work there, and that I'll talk a little bit about more later. Support here at home, especially on Capitol Hill, remains strong from our partners and supporters. We know that the budget environment is very difficult across the federal government, and particularly with foreign operations. But we are out there meeting with members of Congress at every opportunity. We've had events at the Capitol Visitor Center with staffers and interns, and really just want to continue to emphasize the critical role that Peace Corps plays in people-to-people diplomacy and what that means over time. So as I'm talking about, the prime ministers, the ministers, the other foreign leaders, the presidents who come and make time for Peace Corps, it's because we have been there over decades. And we see now, and this is for those of you who maybe served early on in Peace Corps, early years where it was considered an experiment in international living. What I see now is that experiment is yielding tremendous goodwill and relationships that truly do last a lifetime. So what are some of the emerging realities? We have a lot of great things happening throughout the agency right now, a lot of innovation, some of which we'll talk about. But we also know that a lot has changed in the world. It's different than it was before the pandemic. And the number one challenge that we are facing in this post-pandemic world is recruitment. As you may have heard, this is a challenge for everyone, from the military to AmeriCorps to Teach for America to other nonprofits. I heard about these same struggles at a national level while in Texas for the annual Points of Light conference, and while meeting with other countries' volunteer organizations, including KOICA, the South Korean volunteer sending agency, JICA, Australian volunteers, New Zealand volunteers. And our team was just at IVCO, which is the Association for International Volunteer Sending Organizations. And this is just something that we're all struggling with and trying to understand what's happening, what are the root causes, and importantly, how do we inspire service in this present reality? And I will say that we have a lot of theories, some different hypotheses, but not a lot of real answers that are backed by data. And so this is a time where we are doubling down on our recruiting efforts, our marketing efforts, asking for all of the returned volunteers to engage and tell someone personally about their path and how their Peace Corps service really transformed their lives, and people who can say, hey, we've got your back and you can do this. Because there is also, I think, some level of risk aversion coming out of the tremendous uncertainty that we all experienced during COVID. So what we do know is that there is still tremendous polarization. There are different climate disasters, political unrest. There are changes in how people want to engage, whether it is more flexible opportunities or in more familiar settings. We know that trust in institutions is at an all-time low here in the US. And we know that new generations and what they're interested in engaging with is changing. And in some cases, that means that change is more around supporting issues like food security and climate, as opposed to, general service per se. So these are all things that we continue to look at the data. We continue to observe trends. We've got some new barrier analysis work that will be launching soon. And it has forced us to be incredibly adaptive and creative. And there's nothing like a challenge for Peace Corps to stand up and get creative. So there's some really exciting stuff that we're doing to respond to what we're seeing now, 2 years into this post-pandemic return. So how are we adapting? We can go to the next slide, Mike. With respect to recruiting and outreach, a lot of what we're doing is innovating our recruitment models and our outreach through technology. That is both through very targeted marketing campaigns, social media resources, handshake apps, and texting capabilities so that we can meet potential recruits where they are. We're also working with brand ambassadors, again, on college campuses, adding a chatbot to the website to easily answer people's basic questions. And we're coming up with creative partnerships and ways to mobilize others around a joint commitment to inspiring a new era of service across our nation. So in June, we hosted a Service for America Summit at Peace Corps headquarters. And this was pulling from the Commission's report on national service that was launched almost simultaneously with the global pandemic and lost a little bit of steam. So we're pulling that back up. We got together with various leaders in AmeriCorps, the military, nonprofit sector, to really say, how can we all come together and amplify a national call for service in a whole of government, a whole of nation approach that really resonates with and facilitates action among those who are potential participants in a very dynamic and evolving marketplace. So we continue to pursue those opportunities to really lift up and intentionally seek ways to uplift the importance of service and to inspire. We're also pursuing closer partnerships with other service and volunteer organizations, both inside and outside of the federal government, to help increase the pipeline of applicants into the Peace Corps. So as I mentioned, with respect to AmeriCorps, we signed an MOU with them earlier this year, and we continue to work with them and with service commissions across the United States to make sure that AmeriCorps alum know about Peace Corps and the opportunities to serve internationally, and vice versa. So when RPCVs are coming back from service, they're aware of AmeriCorps funded programs and opportunities to serve back here. As RPCVs, you all know how valuable experience in the Peace Corps is to working in positive ways with communities here in the US. And just as the NPCA, we are committed to promoting and encouraging that lifelong service. So in that spirit, we will also soon be launching a new initiative called the Circle of Service. The Circle of Service essentially is looking at and partnering with service programs that have large alumni networks, and similar to AmeriCorps, looking at how we can make those alumni aware of the opportunity to serve in Peace Corps. How can we expedite their consideration once they apply? And again, how can we loop Peace Corps volunteers back into their organizations? So we will be launching this new initiative with an initial group of partners, including Tilting Futures, which was formerly Global Citizen Year. We've got Teach for America, City Year, and Public Allies. So again, all aimed at promoting service and collective recruitment. Peace Corps is also very excited to be a part of America 250. So 2026 will be the 250th birthday for the United States, and planning is already underway for how to celebrate this major milestone. It will be Peace Corps' 65th anniversary as well. And one of the central pillars of America 250 is called America Gives. And there will be major efforts in 2026 to promote volunteerism, to promote giving, to promote service. And we hope to work significantly with NPCA to really activate our RPCV network around the United States so that it is very visible and very vocal about Peace Corps service, the opportunity to serve, and the contribution of volunteers and RPCVs right here in America. One other new thing I'd like to talk about is Peace Corps' strategy to secure a resilient future. We all recognize that the impact of climate change is really impacting frontline communities around the world. They are disproportionately impacted. They are often very low emitters and very low contributors to the problem, but really feel the impact in their daily lives. So this strategy is a comprehensive agency-wide approach that looks both at our programming and how our volunteers can contribute to climate resilience, as well as how we as an agency are greening our operations and reducing our carbon footprint. We also recognize that for many in this generation, the impacts of climate change are being felt in a very existential way, and it's an issue area that we all care about and have made a tremendous commitment to. It is our hope that some of the climate programming will attract this next generation, and we are seeing that in some of our countries that are rolling out some dedicated programming around climate change. But we know that all of this is not necessarily enough. We recognize that for many in this generation, 2 years feels like a long time, a long commitment. And again, this is not just here in the United States. This is happening around the world with other volunteer sending organizations where people are looking for shorter service and hybrid models. So we all know that Peace Corps has a virtual service program. We have launched some new pilots, and these are very targeted in specific countries. So these are not available for every country, but our intent here is to offer some of these pilots, see how it impacts recruiting, see how it impacts people's willingness to go to some of what we call our hidden gem countries that are struggling with recruitment more than others, and to see what kinds of incentives might really push people across the finish line if they are interested, but having some doubts. So the first pilot has us doubling the readjustment allowance, and that is really taking into consideration some of the inflationary factors. Doing this across the board would clearly require a significant change in our appropriations or reduction in the number of volunteers. Some of our sister agencies have made that tough trade-off of really increasing allowances and dramatically reducing the number of volunteers. That is not where we want to be right now, but we do want to understand motivations and barriers to service and what is the impact of things like student debt on people's willingness to serve. The second pilot is about providing home leave between year 1 and 2. This is really about the disparities, and some people can afford to go back home, other people can't. 2 years is a long time to be away from your family, and providing home leave between year 1 and 2 could be a less expensive option and less of an adjustment to our overall sort of model than the third option that we're piloting, which is adding a 1-year service model. So this would actually be 15 months, so 3 months of service with 3 months of training with 1 year of service. And then we would look to incentivize that second year so that we do get that longer term commitment and people are able to come in and really experience Peace Corps and understand what it's all about. Interestingly, we are seeing very high rates of volunteers in those early groups who are wanting to extend for a 3rd year. And when I was in Tonga, it was just so heartwarming. I believe almost everyone in that group, and it was a small cohort in that the initial 2-year cohort, but almost every one of them wanted to extend for a 3rd year. Also, excitingly, within a few days, we will be announcing a new initiative with Discovery Education. And I'd like to give just tremendous kudos to Andrew Wilson, who is on this call, and the Third Goal team. This partnership will bring information about the communities we serve, about our diversity, equity, and inclusion work, about service, about bridging differences across borders, to millions of educators and students around the United States. So this partnership will provide educational materials that teachers can use that are directly linked to the curricula requirements in their state. And it has all been refreshed. It is dynamic. It is beautiful. And we're very excited to launch this initiative, to promote it, and to really get all of those materials out to students earlier on so that they are learning about and exposed to Peace Corps in the classrooms. I can't tell you how many people I have met who said they joined the Peace Corps because they heard about it from a teacher, they heard about it in high school, and just always dreamed of being a volunteer. And last but not least, I'm thrilled to actually add on to Dan's remarks around our new 5-year MOU with NPCA. It is a great partnership. We have such a robust RPCV community. It is really something that every volunteer sending organization, whether it's domestic or international, is envious of, and they wonder what it is about Peace Corps, what it is about our RPCVs that they want to stay engaged over a lifetime. I think we all know the answer to that in our hearts, and it's something that's hard to translate. And it's just such a beautiful community to be a part of. So thank you, Dan, and the NPCA team for all of the work that you do. So moving forward, I believe you've all heard a lot about our Each One, Reach One campaign. And really, this is our call to you all, our ask of you all, that you, really as RPCVs are the best recruiting tool that we have. Almost everyone I've spoken with, again, it's either from the classroom or have joined Peace Corps because they heard about it from someone they knew, someone they respected, someone who encouraged them, someone who inspired them, and not in a general way, someone who said, hey, I think you can do this. And I think this would be a really good fit for you. So again, a lot of gratitude to NPCA for their support in this campaign, and to our teams who are putting together materials. I know there's been some feedback, and we are adjusting the materials and trying to make sure that they are meeting the needs of those who are out there talking about Peace Corps, whether it's at a high school, at an alma mater, or just at a backyard barbecue. There have been some fun PSAs in the past about how Peace Corps volunteers love to tell stories. So I know it's not a big ask for anyone to tell the story of their service, but would also love to have you tell the story of how your service impacted your career. And that is something that is certainly important to people, and increasingly important to younger generations who are, looking at what is the path that something like this provides. And is it a 2-year detour, or is it a path to something bigger and better? And that comes to life from the stories of successful people like yourselves who are on this call, whether it led to a fabulous career in teaching or in the private sector, how those skills that you learned really have helped transform how you approach your professional journey and your personal journey. So that's a lot. I tried to just pack as much as I could into just a few short comments so that we have some time for questions. Um, Let me just wrap up by saying that I'm very excited about the innovation that is happening, the vibrancy of what is happening at our posts. Again, whether it is new partnerships or new service models, it is a very dynamic time for Peace Corps, and our teams are just boldly facing the challenge and saying, let's do this. It's hard to let go of things that we have been doing for a while and we know are quite successful. Um, but this is a time where we have to innovate and we have to try new things. And Peace Corps, if nothing else, is flexible and adaptive and again, just beloved around the world. So thank you again for everything that you do to continue to promote this amazing work and to serve right back here in the United States. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Carol. I agree that we are
I
a
agree that
very
we
will echo
will
here.
echo.
I agree that we are a very adaptive and flexible community. The Marine Corps has their Simplify. I say we're Semper Flexible in the Peace Corps community. I also though congratulate you on your in the agency on its bravery and breaking the mold, because it is easy, and I think there are a lot of people in our community who would like to see that same model that they expected. So I know that some of the pilot ideas might not be the most popular ideas. I think it's really important to try, and I think you'll have a lot of good data, and hopefully start making some good progress as a result. At this point, we'd love to open it up, and thank you, Carol, for agreeing to taking a few questions. We did ask a few of our participants in a forum a couple of days ago if they had questions for you, and we had a couple come in that I'll ask. And then if you have questions for the director, please raise your virtual hand. And we have committed to getting Director Spahn out of this Zoom meeting by 1/4 hour. So we have exactly 10 minutes, and we'll take as many questions as we can get through during that time. Sound good?
Great.
The first question that came in was from John D, and he's asking about new ways to support RPCVs during their post-service careers and professional development. I know you talk to a lot of graduate school partners and other partners, and certainly we're asked every week, how can we tap into the RPCV job-seeking pipeline? But what new or what can you share in response to John about new ways to support career services?
Mhm. Well, again, this is Andrew and his team, so a lot of great third goal stuff happening. They are a small but mighty team doing fabulous work, and I know MPCA does a lot as well in terms of supporting people post service. One thing that we're doing is working with volunteers much earlier in their transition. We know that things take time. We know that people want to make plans. So one thing even for Peace Corps that we're very excited about is we are working with our posts around the world to find out who is interested in working at the Peace Corps so that we can get their applications in early, get them started on security clearances and all of the things so that the people can really hit the ground running when they get back home. We also have, as you've mentioned, Dan, tremendous demand from a lot of federal partners and others who are looking for RPCVs and people who have just recently completed service. So we're working very closely with them to make sure that volunteers who are completing their service are aware of the kinds of opportunities and how their NCE status can support them.
Thanks. And we've seen increasing participation in the in-person career fairs that the Third Goal Office is doing again now. So kudos to you on that. Let's take a live question next. And before Chris, we'll ask you to unmute and ask your question to the director. I do want to remind everyone that immediately following this Q&A, we will pivot into our quarterly town hall discussion. So we have a great turnout, and we'd love to have you stay on the line, and we'll get your further questions, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about how we can support the director's vision here. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dan and Director Spahn. And so great hearing your remarks and comments. As I mentioned, I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer from Ukraine, and I'm also the coordinator of the Peace Corps Prep program at the University of Arizona. One issue that has come up with a number of students over the past couple of years is the medical screening. So coming out of the pandemic, I think there's a very heightened discussion about mental health issues and medications and students dealing with that. And I know historically Peace Corps has been risk adverse when it comes to mental health, medical screening. I'm just wondering if you have any sort of comments or updates or information that I could maybe share with my students on how they should be thinking about that, or any sort of change in approach or thinking that Peace Corps might have related to mental health and accommodating volunteers during their service. Thank you.
Okay. Can I just add on to that? Another
Sure.
question that we had come in online was asking about the barriers to service for, especially medical barriers for people over a certain age, 60 years and 60-year-old volunteers and older.
Great. Great question. Let me just say that Peace Corps remains committed to making service accessible to people wherever we can, right? We want to be a place that is, open, whether it's age-related or mental health or other medical questions. We do, as you know, have an obligation to provide services, and in some of the countries we serve, those services just simply aren't there. With respect to mental health, we know that accessing mental health services is normative, right? It is something that we all do, many people do. It's something during the pandemic where people dealt with a lot of uncertainty. We've had collective trauma coming out of the pandemic. And that should not be a barrier. Having sought services should not be a barrier to service. Every individual's case is examined individually, so it's really hard to make sweeping statements. What I can say about our support services in country is that we've added services for people who are preclinical. And what that means is there are basically on-demand coaches who are available online for volunteers who might be experiencing adjustment difficulties or need coaching in some other area of their lives. If it then gets to a clinical diagnosis point, then they are referred to the PCMOs for care. But that is something that we anticipated pre-pandemic as being a challenge coming out of the pandemic, and made sure that we had the resources there. And what we've experienced is really great utilization and really very, very positive results and feedback about that coaching service that's currently added. So the intent there is to catch issues, before they get into a clinical diagnosis space. So the approach, I think, in a post-COVID environment really does recognize what we've all been through. And what I would tell students is that having access to mental health services, doesn't in and of itself preclude you from service, and that they will get an individualized assessment. If I can say the medical clearance process itself is challenging. People's health histories have become more complex in a post-COVID environment, and we continue to hear that from the teams who are doing clearances. And so it can take longer than maybe it did in a pre-COVID environment, but know that that's because our teams are really taking the care to understand each individual's situation and make sure that if we are able to place them, we're able to place them in somewhere that can accommodate their needs. And that is the lens, is to try to get to yes, to try to enable folks to be able to serve. And that's evolved, frankly, from, initially, right after the pandemic, there was concern, for example, of people who are in high-risk categories for COVID and could we get Paxlovid, right? So some of those early groups might have experienced, some things that have since been removed, right? It's a dynamic process.
Thanks, Carol. And it's good to know that these cases are handled individually and by a team. I want to get to Hermence's question, but earlier in the chat, just a quick question from our friend Janet Gregg. What is Peace Corps' current capacity for volunteers in the field? Where, and maybe to put a number on it, if you're comfortable with that, where would you like to be by, say, the end of 2025, realistically, with boots in the field?
Well, so, that's a complex question that has budgetary implications. There are recruiting implications. There are a lot of factors that go into it. Pre-pandemic, we were close to 7,000. So, we are working our way to get back at least to a pre-pandemic level, but there are constraints right now to getting there.
Yeah, and a few less countries maybe as well. Yeah.
We're in about the same number of countries. We were in 64 countries prior to the pandemic. I believe we're at 60, 61 right now, or 61 with El Salvador once we have volunteers.
Great. Hermence, would you like to ask your question? Good to see you.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you, Carol, for the wonderful updates. So my question really is almost like a follow-up to the previous question about mental health. And I also put it in the chat. When it comes to the coaching services prior to, are they, what does that actually include? Because there are individuals who don't realize that they may need mental health services until they're actually at service going through. So is it offered to everyone that the fact that they can come in and access these services, or do they have to have a previous diagnosis of some sort? And then also, mental health is a touchy, subject. It's a touchy thing. Not everyone wants to be, say that I need help. However, there are other things. I'm a positive intelligence and mindset coach. And so there are other tools that can help, volunteers, I feel like, really overcome some of the sabotaging behaviors that they may have. That keep them from, performing well, from their own, improving their own well-being and figuring out their own, what challenges exist and how to overcome them. So what type of tools, apart from just, the base coaching, clinical coaching services, do they acquire or do they have in order to help them through?
Great question. And nice to see you. So the first question I lost in the follow-up, but I will say in terms of the tools, also during the pandemic, it was a time for the team to really update and upgrade some of the resiliency training. And there is an online toolkit, a wellness toolkit that is offered to volunteers. Oh, I remember the first question now. And the coaching is available to anyone. So it's advertised, at post, it's made available. I walked into one of the posts, they had a little QR code and a sign right when you walk into the volunteer lounge. So those things are well known and understood. And there's been a lot of work done with the peer support network as well. So that are other volunteers who go through training and, agree to be a point of contact for their peers, and they can help direct them to those resources. It is a, I think a different environment right now. And our teams also did a lot of work during the pandemic themselves for how to be an active listener, how to coach. We do a lot of coach approach work anyway, but we really leaned into a lot of those things. So I think the teams are well positioned to support volunteers.
Carol, thank you so much. With apologies to a few people we didn't get to, I did commit to getting you out 2 minutes ago. So I did receive your question, Donald, and I'll try to follow up for you and any others. You can stay on and we'll try to collect anything we didn't get to. But Carol, thank you for your leadership. This is always a treat to have you address our National Peace Corps Association community. And we wish you well in your next event this evening. I know you have to run.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Thank you all again for taking the time to be here on a Friday night and for continuing to care and engage with this beautiful organization and just mission that I know we all love and care about so much. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, folks. Bye-bye.